Happy Friday, Dog Nation. Welcome into Dog Nation's Freeze Frame. Hope you're all enjoying some beautiful spring weather here as we head towards the weekend. Of course, the other thing that we're heading towards is G-Day coming up next Saturday. And over the course of the last few weeks, we've been lucky enough with our great analyst, John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American, to get a chance to break down some of the players that expect to feature prominently in G-Day coming up next week and also for the upcoming season for the Georgia Bulldogs. Today will be no different. We're going to take a look at Georgia outside linebacker Adam Anderson. First, let me remind you that Dog Nation Freeze Frame today is brought to you by our friends at Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. And obviously, the divorce process is an uncomfortable conversation. It's the kind of thing that I hope that our audience doesn't have to go through. But statistically speaking, in an audience the size of this, some people, unfortunately, either have gone through it, think they might be about to go through it, or you're actually in the midst of that right now. Obviously, our prayers are with you if you're dealing with something along those lines. But my advice for you is to also take a big step to put a strong advocate on your side, someone that can walk with you step by step to make you whole again with the relationship with your family and your finances and everything else that goes along with that. Meriwether and Tharp is my recommendation to you. They're your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. They've been through cases like this thousands of times before. The institutional knowledge they gain from having done that, they can put that to work for you, and they can find out about the specific facts of your specific situation and then advise you in the way that you should go after that. So initial consultation, free. First step belongs to you. After that, make the decision to put them to work for you. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. Let me tell you a little bit about why we're going to talk about Adam Anderson today on Dog Nation's Freeze Frame. Some of this obviously stems from the fact that UGA fans have been curious about Anderson for the entirety of the offseason up to this point. And then there was former Georgia outside linebacker Azeez Ojulari, who made an appearance this week on Dog Nation Daily. And when I had a chance to ask Azeez what he thought about his old position group, the outside linebacker spot at UGA, now that he's gone, well, Azeez expressed some confidence in many of the guys who were still there. Robert Beal, Nolan Smith, and in particular, Adam Anderson, who Ojulari had some pretty special praise for. Take a listen to this, and then we'll talk about how exactly Adam Anderson might be able to get it done this season. This Azeez Ojulari on the rest of the Georgia outside linebackers. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I expect them to dominate, definitely for sure. Next season coming up, I expect them to dominate. The standard is there for them to set and go after it, and, you know, all those boys could play. So Rob, definitely, I expect Rob to get out there, make big plays. Nolan Smith for sure. And I know Adam is on a different level. I believe Adam throw up some crazy numbers up there. I believe Adam can get in the double digits of sacks, and Nolan too. So it should be a great time watching those boys. I can't wait to watch them play.
Great to hear Azeez Ojulari there, a prohibitive favorite to be a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Speaks so glowingly about the guys who are at the outside linebacker spot in his place now at the University of Georgia. And I'll bring in John Stinchcomb here. John, in particular, when it comes to Adam Anderson, who he calls a player on a different level, and says that he thinks that Anderson could get double-digit sacks for Georgia this season. You know, I'm looking forward to hearing, after watching film on Anderson, what you think about him exactly. But let me start with that phrase that Ojulari uses. You know, from what you've seen, exactly why is it that Anderson could be described as somebody who would know Ojulari himself playing the game at a high level, why it is that Anderson has viewed as being on a different level, the way that Ojulari describes it right there?
It's a great assessment because he is on a different level. You watch the way he plays, and he has a first step that not very many players have. He's so quick off the ball, not to mention he's so long. That 6'5" frame, he uses it time and time again in pass rush situations. You look at it on a day-in, day-out basis like Azeez has done for the past few years, why he projects him to be a double-digit sack guy.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting fact. Here on our Dog Nation Freeze Frame, we'll be showing you some of these images that John was just describing there, you know, from the Auburn game and some of the other things there in terms of exactly what Anderson brings to the table. And, you know, something that you said a moment ago, John, I think is worth revisiting here, that a lot of Georgia fans kind of wonder, are we going to see somebody kind of show up and, you know, to the full potential they bring to the table? But for Georgia at the outside linebacker spot, that's been difficult to do simply on the basis of the fact that with Ojulari as a first-round pick, you know, unfortunately, Anderson's had to share a lot of time with a lot of other, you know, highly touted guys within that same position group.
Yes, and the way, you know, it's almost like a misnomer these days that, you know, the 3-4 outside linebacker, the way Georgia runs their defense, it's predicated on down and distance and obviously the personnel grouping that an offense deploys. So whether he's lined up as an outside linebacker or they shift him down just a little bit and he becomes a defensive end on the film and he's got his hand in the dirt, probably more times 2-to-1 as the times he lines up as a true stand-up outside linebacker. And that's just the way that Georgia runs their defense. And it's pretty standard when you see these 3-4 teams. It's based on personnel groupings and down and distance. So for Adam, you look at him, he's played both of those, but the more comfortable he gets, the more opportunity he has to stay on the field based on alignment.
Well, let's talk about that alignment here for a little bit, because I think when I think about the Georgia outside linebacker spot, different ways in which the two spots are kind of used. In fact, it's at certain times, the nickelback kind of becomes the sort of the second outside linebacker, and you don't really have that traditional outside linebacker in the game. Would you mind going into a little bit more detail about this, about how the two different outside linebacker spots in those moments when Georgia does have two of those guys in the game, how they are different, and how the best we can tell, the Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart scheme, causes those guys to be used?
Yeah. So the best thing about a 3-4 defense is it gives you such variability. You can shift where guys line up. You can change up your personnel groupings. It makes it hard on a quarterback and an offensive line to see where they're coming from. And that star position, it's a sub-package 3-4 outside linebacker by alignment. So him playing star is no different in where he lines up, but it's probably a difference in assignment. We've heard about that from Coach Smart during this spring camp, that he's getting more reps at star. Really, that's outside linebacker against a sub package from the offensive group. So the more he can stay out there, the more opportunities he'll get, the more chances to increase that number up to a double-digit sack total at the end of the year. You just have to be able to drop into coverage and do those kind of things. But by pure alignment, I think what the difference has been is with Azeez Ojulari and Jermaine Johnson, they played defensive end a little bit in that 3-4 scheme and could also flex out to that outside linebacker with Jordan Davis in the middle. And now we're seeing, Nolan Smith is a guy that's played that dual role. And the question is for Adam, can he play a little bit more of that, or is he outside of a Travon Walker and a Jalen Carter playing the 3-4 defensive end and can rush and cover from that outside linebacker spot?
So let's talk about something you brought up there for a moment too, as you start thinking about Anderson more as a guy in coverage. This is something that we've seen Georgia outside linebackers do before. Lorenzo Carter played in coverage a pretty good bit. In fact, some of these guys would probably tell you they wish they got a chance to actually rush the passer a little bit more. Sometimes they were probably, disappointed with the level with which they were asked to do things that were not pass rush duties from time to time. But Carter was, good at that. You mentioned Leonard Floyd before him as somebody that would have also, been able to do, those kinds of things. So in terms of when we've heard Kirby Smart thus far this spring talking about, hey, playing as a star, as someone that can be in coverage, in terms of what you could envision Anderson doing, first of all, how much have we seen from him thus far in his Georgia career? But in a potential role like that, how different or similar would that be to what we've seen guys like, Floyd and Carter doing in the past?
Well, that's the next step for Adam Anderson. What we saw, you see in the alignment section that we discussed, they tried to find ways to create mismatch problems for Adam to get sacks, to rush the quarterback. You saw him at outside linebacker, at a defensive end position. You even saw him in inside linebacker and the angles that they were trying to create. But ultimately, what was he doing? He's rushing the passer. For him to stay on the field more, for that comparison to hold true, that he's more like a Lorenzo Carter or a Leonard Floyd in that true outside linebacker role, we've got to see more reps with him dropping into coverage. It may not be as natural because he certainly is a high-end pass rushing threat for any opposing offense. They need to know where he's at. But for him to stay on the field more, you can't always – we just talked about the variability of a 3-4 and what it brings. If we already know that 19 is coming off the edge, it's a known commodity for that entire offense. And you can't be as variable on the defense. So it very much matters he can drop into coverage or not.
So when you compare Anderson to, as you heard Ojulari mention a moment ago, a guy like Robert Beal, who we probably haven't seen in his Georgia career as much as we, maybe would have liked to. Maybe this is the year we do that. But in particular, Nolan Smith, who's someone that probably got, even though Anderson was a 5-star, Nolan probably got a little bit more attention than Anderson, simply on the basis that Nolan was the number one player in the country for the class of 2019. Would you compare an Anderson to a Smith? And in your mind, is Anderson more likely for that big season than someone like Nolan Smith is? And if so, on the basis of some of the stuff that you've shown us here today, why do you think that is?
Yeah, so here's what I see. I see Nolan Smith as a guy who can play in rundowns with his hand in the dirt at the point of attack. I think we've seen that before. We've already seen that in how Georgia has used him. What we haven't seen is that from Adam Anderson. So it's limited his reps already. For him to stay on the field, it's going to take a little bit different role. I think it's more seeing him in the coverage from that position, dropping into coverage in the zones, which, there's times where he would play the role of the spy on the quarterback or very simple zone coverage. That's fine. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Whereas Nolan Smith, he's probably more of a great pass rusher who you're going to see at the point of attack and rundowns. If Adam Anderson can be the guy that drops into coverage, is the offhang, the overhang outside linebacker next to a Jalen Carter or Trayvon Walker, who's holding the point, but's taking on some of the lighter blockers, where Nolan Smith could play the interior role. Adam Anderson is more the edge player and will need to be so if he's going to get the reps.
I think we'll finish with this. John, when I listen to you, one of the things that gets me excited is, and I felt like this started a year ago with Azeez Ojulari, I love the personality this Georgia defense has taken on as of late. And I say that knowing full well results in like Alabama and Florida last year, what fans wanted them to be. But the way in which this team is now affecting other quarterbacks more, opposing offenses all of a sudden getting after them, those havoc plays we talked about before, this team clearly took a big step forward in being able to do that a year ago. And I think in the role that you're describing for Adam Anderson, an expanded role for him this year, thinking that Georgia now takes even more of a step in that direction in 2021 after what was started in 2020. For me as a fan, John, I've got to tell you, I find that to be really exciting.
Well, it's super exciting because of the flexibility and variability that you have because of the amount of talent, whether it's defensive end or outside linebacker. I don't care what you call them. You just have great athletes, and that creates opportunities for one another. When we're breaking down Adam Anderson film, a lot of it has to do with who's coming off the other edge. If that's Azeez Ojulari, well, who's drawing the attention this week? It's probably Azeez, and creating more opportunities for other guys. When you've got guys like Smith and Carter and Walker that are big athletes that you have to be concerned about in the passing game, it creates opportunities for other guys. And there's more names in that mix of where this pass rush is going to come from. But ultimately, I think it goes back to week one when we were doing freeze frame, where it all starts, and that's Jordan Davis in the middle. Yeah. If you have a 3-4, you've got to have that anchor in the middle that creates the variability at defensive end and outside linebacker. And it's because of Jordan Davis' big self eating up the first two gaps, both A gaps, sometimes drawing an extra guard, that causes more havoc that can be created on the outside. So it's complementary football where inside this box, because there's more guys that you can rely on, it creates variability, it creates some confusion on the offense, and great opportunity.
It's a great breakdown of a player that I think is just fascinating this upcoming season. Adam Anderson, big expectations. Azeez Ojulari laid him out there. John Stinchcomb just described for you how it might get done. A lot of fun. John, thanks so much for being here on this edition of our Dog Nation Freeze Frame, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Of course, you can find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com, your source for Georgia divorce. John, we appreciate it. We'll look forward to speaking to you again next week. And by the time you and I talk on this show next Friday, we'll be just one day away from G-Day, and won't that be a lot of fun?
Can't wait for it. Go Dogs.
Folks, we'll see you next week. Dog Nation Freeze Frame, presented this week by Merriweather and Tharp. Talk to you soon, everybody.